All right there, YouTube. Welcome back. Another cold day for me here, sitting at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that puts us at 0 degrees Celsius outside temperature. And first thing, I just want to say thanks for the few people who have subscribed recently since my last couple videos and some of the comments. It's pretty encouraging to see a few folks out there enjoying the videos. So thanks, everybody. Next thing, I went ahead and changed a few settings. If you guys remember the last video, I took some fuel out of the VE table, and the car had a hard time starting. But what I did was I went ahead and took out that 3% from the table once again. And what I did was I smoothed out a lot of the temperature and fuel settings in the warm-up enrichment and the after start enrichment. So what I did was I just blended the temperatures and I matched them all with all the settings, and I just added more fuel, about I want to say 4%, so just a little bit more fuel to compensate for all the fuel that I took out of the table. Hopefully that way, once it's actually warmed up and running at the optimal operating temperature, hopefully having the parameters for the warm-up enrichment, after start enrichment, and the idle control valve for fuel and air, to have everything adding more fuel percentage when the engine is cold, and then once it switches over to the VE table, to take some of that fuel out so that it's not running so rich, as we saw in the last video. So it's not a lot, but hopefully that these settings that I went ahead and adjusted actually improve that startup and not having it dumping so much fuel when it's trying to warm up. So another thing I did was, like we were talking about with the knock sensor. So knock sensor settings is not what I'm looking at. If I go to knock sensor, not settings, but knock sensor parameters, I went ahead and, so if you go online, what you're looking at here with your frequency in kilohertz, depending on the size of your cylinder bore, your engine is going to ping or knock at a certain frequency. Okay, so the 3SGTE sits at a 86 millimeter bore size, and using the calculator online, it gives me a 6.74 or 6.70 kilohertz frequency for the engine. So the only settings you can have here is between that 6.7 is 6.64 and 6.94. So what I did is, last week I had it at the 6.94, so I dropped it to see if it improves, I guess, for the sensor not to be picking up that other frequency. I just, instead of rounding up, I rounded down to that 6.64, so I'll leave it there. Let's see, what else did I change? I'm gonna keep messing with this time constant. So this is the amount of samples that the ECU or the sensor is gonna take for the ECU. So I dropped that to 150 from 100. And what else did I do? I went back to the monitor per cylinder. So the ECU will take a sample from just the one sensor that the engine comes with, and it's going to do its calculation and its interpretation of the signal while the engine is running, and then the same sensor is going to pick up all 4 cylinders. And then I took the gain down from 1.0 to 0.5, so hopefully that gain drop maybe drops and cleans up the signal a little bit. So those are the sensor settings that I'm messing with, and hopefully that improves and gives us a better idea of how the sensor works and what the sensitivity and where it wants to be. Obviously, I guess I don't want to drop it too far so that it doesn't pick up the knock once we start getting into, you know, full power tuning on the dyno and stuff, because obviously knock sensors are very important, and you want to have that added layer of monitoring of your sensor or of your engine to make sure that once you start messing with, you know, the timing at, you know, higher boost, and we can get to, you know, good power and good torque numbers once we get there. So that's where we're at. Right now I'm not going to start the engine. Reason being is, last week when I drove the car and I got home, I noticed when I was driving home, the transmission was whining a little bit. Not like clunking or anything, just kind of sounded like it was whining. And then when I went to park it, I noticed that the tires in the rear that are controlled by the transmission were chirping, almost as if, very, very light chirping, almost as if like when you see those drift cars that have welded diffs, and you know the rear diff is not spinning the tires at, you know, the different speeds, right, when they're turning or whatnot. So it sounded kind of like that. I'm gonna check the fluid. It has new fluid, and I'm gonna top it off. It might be a little low, or it could be the temperatures, because it's, you know, it doesn't get above 40 degrees really outside. So I hope that it's just fluid temperature in the transmission that is causing the LSD to just, you know, maybe bind up a little bit. I'm hoping it's not damaged in any way, but I don't think so. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to top off the fluid, and then I'm also going to reinstall the stock heat shield for the turbo and the exhaust manifold, just to help improve those temperatures that I saw that are a little higher. We'll see in a second. For those of you who may or may not know, the way that the intercooler piping is arranged in these things, in the stock locations, the first hot pipe actually goes over the exhaust manifold. So I'm sure that's heat soaking it a ton. So that being said, I want to put the stock heat shield back on to the manifold just for now, and then we'll figure out other options for heat management and just heat soak issues, because my intake air temperatures at the manifold were a little high that I'm not super happy with. They were at about 120 degrees, and then the lowest I got on the highway when I was cruising in 5th gear at highway speed was about 117. So not terrible, but hopefully this will help a little bit with that heat management. Anyway, I'm going to get working on that fluid in the transmission, just topping it off, making sure, and then get that heat shield on. And then we'll see if these settings here for the fuel and the warm-up are a little better, so that we can get up to temperature better and it's not injecting so much fuel. So here's the stock heat shield, and as you can see, turbo right there. So the intake, turbo, and then the first to the hot pipe that goes to the intercooler goes right over, I mean they both do, but they both go over the exhaust side of the turbo and then the manifold. So I'm just going to put the heat shield back on. Hopefully that doesn't radiate as much heat and it brings our temperatures a little bit down. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just got to loosen this guy up, pop it, move it, and then I should have enough room to get the heat shield back on. Alright, so the not so fun part is that I gotta lay on this cold ass freaking ground, but I can't really see. There's the fill hole right there. It's already cracked that open. Got my phone. And this is the last little bit that I have of gear oil. And went to Harbor Freight and got myself a little transfer pump. So I don't think it's gonna need more than just the 1 quart, hopefully, because I did, like I said, I did fill it when the install was first fresh, and maybe again the temperatures and getting fluid through the transmission probably dropped the level down slightly. So I'll go ahead and top it off, and hopefully it's all good. All right, a little word of wisdom: if you get this pump from Harbor Freight, go a little slow, because I had it pop off. the feed line, and it shot gear oil over my wheel and tire. So got a nice little shiny spot, and it didn't take much. It took about half of the quart, and it started to flow out pretty good. So I'm gonna say it's topped off. Okay, back in the car now. Let's see if these settings work. So if you saw just now, the transmission looks like it's full of fluid, and it took about, I would say, half of that quart before it started to come out of the fill hole. So hopefully, again, I mean, it shifts fine. It's not clunking. It's not making any weird, like, mechanical, metal on metal sounds. It just sounded like it was whining a little bit. And then when I went to park it at low speed, when I was in the parking lot, one of the back wheels, or one of the back tires, chirped slightly as if it were binding up in a way. So I don't know what that might be. Again, it might be the cold temperatures. I mean, we're looking at 0°C or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So maybe that MT90 is just a little too cold back there. I don't know. So hopefully we don't grenade that transmission. Anyway, let's see if we can get this started and see if those settings are a little nicer at startup. Okay, here we go again. So temperature of the coolant is at 30 degrees, so it's pretty cold outside. And let's see if it wants to start with those new fuel settings. Took a couple tries, so I might increase slightly on the warm-up enrichment or the after start enrichment. The knock sensing is way down as compared to before. Before it was hitting about 20% per cylinder. So I think the gain is really going to help where I put it. Close on that knock sensor. So yeah, I do think that the sensitivity was way high, and now it's not showing as much noise coming from the sensor per cylinder, and they're pretty consistent and even on their percentage of knock. So again, I think that's just normal noise that the engine's gonna, or the sensor's gonna see from the engine as it's combusting in there. So I'll wait for this to heat up a little bit. I'm liking the air fuel a little bit more, so I think all I'm gonna have to do is on the colder side of the sensor or the settings for the warm-up enrichment, I'm probably gonna bump this up. I bumped it up about 6% if I remember right. What I'm gonna do is on the colder side, closer to the 30 degrees, I'm gonna increase that by probably 5% more and see if that helps. It's nice to do that right now when the outside temperatures are a lot colder, just to start helping or just to start dialing in that warm-up enrichment. So should be pretty good. It did struggle to start a couple times this time again, but I think that's just because it's so cold outside and I need to bump that up just slightly. So yeah, I'm really liking that. Okay, I'm gonna try. I had the gain at 0.500. I'm gonna drop it to 4 and see how that changes our knock. So I'm gonna try that. Didn't really change much. It dropped it slightly. Maybe I'll leave it there for now and see how that does. So now that the engine was a little bit warmer after I let it warm up to, let's see, 164 degrees on the coolant, it started a lot nicer. So those colder temperatures around the 30 degrees Fahrenheit is where I need to add a little bit more fuel to that warm-up enrichment, because now that it's warm, it did pretty good. Air fuel I'm a lot happier with now that the engine is actually warmed up. We're pretty close to our target. Let's see, we'll go here. This is where I have my parameter so far. It's not a perfect table, I know, but that should be pretty safe. Enough fuel when coming into boost, and I mean it's still pretty heavy on the fuel, but I like it at idle right now. It's looking pretty good. I think I'm gonna drive it, maybe put a little bit more fuel in it. That's the sender unit off of the RCI fuel cell, and I like to keep it above half at least. I do want to change the fuel cell or have it modified because it's a top feed, so it just has a top feed line that goes from the very top of the tank all the way down, and I'm worried that it might slosh around, and I don't want to use any foam in the cell. What I want to do is maybe have it modified so it's a bottom feeder, and then maybe locate it from the trunk where I have it up to the front of the vehicle. Maybe I'm gonna do something like that. I don't know, but that'll come in time. All right, guys. All in all, pretty good. I like that the knock sensor is not going off as much and blipping all over the place. So I think that the sensitivity was set a little too high. So that's good. Air fuel, I added a little bit more fuel around the table where I'm at cruising, because my air fuel ratio was a lot leaner than before. So that's just gonna be something that we're gonna have to keep playing with. And I didn't hear really anything coming from the transmission. It felt pretty good parking it. I didn't hear any chatter like I did last week or chirping from one of the tires. And I don't know, I feel like when I was coming, let's see, when I was accelerating from stops, I feel like there was like a weird vibration back there. So maybe something is loose, and I just gotta track down, make sure that everything's good. But that'll be something I gotta do when I get it on the lift. So I'll leave you all here for now, and everything looks pretty good so far. Thanks. We'll see you on the next one.